Welcome to the Pat White Show.
Well, if you were one of the millions of people that watched the president's speech last night, first be advised it wasn't a State of the Union speech. It was sort of a State of America speech. But there's a number of things that stuck out in that speech. Here's the big one. It lasted an hour and a half. Now, I know that seems long, but believe it or not, Bill Clinton actually did one that was an hour and 28 minutes. So the president's speech was like 2 minutes longer, but, hour and a half, he set a record. And he talked about a whole lot of stuff that was going on. And the first thing he said was, America is back. And then, the Republicans broke into a big cheer. All right, fine. That was item number one that came up. Item number two was when Al Green, a Republican or a representative from the state of Texas, I think it's Houston, got up with his cane and started yelling and hollering and making a big clamor. Now, you have to understand, Al Green is the one who's been screaming and screeching for Trump to be, impeached again. I'm not sure they're going to try that again because they ain't going to get nowhere now. But anyway, and then, of course, you get the Speaker of the House gaveling and saying, hey, we got rules here, decorum. You do your job, sit down, shut up. Well, Al Green was going to have none of that. And he continued to rant and rave, and finally the Speaker said, hey, Sergeant Arms, take this guy out. Well, they did. And now he's going to be reviewed for violations of House rules, but he said, I don't care. He said, whatever the punishment is, I don't care. So he's going to live with what he did. He did what he did. He got himself a big show on TV. Number three, this is the one that kind of bothered me a lot. When Trump honored the various moms of the girls who were killed, there was that Joycelyn Nungray, I believe her name is, when her mom was there. She was a 12-year-old girl that was kidnapped in the store, taken under an overpass and raped and killed. And then there was also the Lincoln Riley thing. And that's a new law that was passed. And both of those things, the Democrats sat on their hands, did nothing, said nothing, and ignored it. I'm sorry, folks, but that's not going to sit well with America. That's just my opinion, but I don't think it's going to sit well with America. And number four that came up in that event was when Trump revealed that the ISIS terrorist who was responsible for the bombing at the Baghdad airport that killed 13 Americans had been arrested and was being sent back to the U.S. and apparently was hiding out in Pakistan. Gee, Afghanis hiding out in Pakistan. Wonder why? Well, anyway, he's been caught, and he's been being sent back to the United States for justice in the United States. Can't wait to see what attorneys are going to say, I want to defend him. Really. All right, and finally, this is a big one that I thought was kind of a feel-good story. About the 13-year-old kid, his name is DJ Daniel, had a brain tumor, brain cancer. They said he had 6 months to live. Well, he's outlived it already. And he wanted to be a Houston police officer. That was his goal, become a police officer. And it was heartwarming. It was very neat. And there he was in the police uniform and everything, a Houston patch on it. But the president said something pretty cool, which I liked. He said, tell you what we're going to do. We are going to make you an official member of the Secret Service. Now, you saw the gentleman who came in and presented the young Mr. Daniel his badge, his credentials. That gentleman, in case you didn't know, during the Trump campaign for last year, every time you saw Trump in that campaign, you saw that gentleman in the picture. He was right next to Donald Trump for every single picture you saw. Now, why is that? Because he was Trump's main bodyguard. And as such, Trump appointed him to be the head of the U.S. Secret Service. Now, I know that with those who are talking about Dan Bongino getting the job, but this guy was guarding Trump 24 hours a day. He was in every picture, and now he's the head of the Secret Service, and I think that's a pretty good choice. Pretty good choice. And the other thing I thought was pretty interesting was when Trump was talking about that young man, multiple letters. I think he had five letters. Has a GPA of 4.45. That's even smarter than smart. Did you notice his coat on his lapel? He had a cross. And Trump said he wants to get into West Point. That's where he wants to go. And Trump announced, "Hey, son, you have just won yourself an appointment to West Point." That was pretty cool. So overall, those are the things that I took away from the event. Yes, there was the Democrats sitting on their hands, holding up their paper signs. Looked like they were at a Saints Alive auction, for crying out loud. Or somebody's auction, holding up their signs, whatever words on. It looked pretty pathetic. But not applauding or not saying anything about some very important things. People's kids were killed and ignoring it. Sorry, folks, that was a little strong. And that's my takeaway on what I saw. And in the meeting last night, or the Trump's, not State of the Nation, but, well, how's it going, America? And he told you. Took him an hour and a half to do it, but he certainly told you. And the numbers indicate America, the majority of Americans, thought he did a very good job. Well, I hate to admit this, but I actually watched the Academy Awards, not because I was interested in who was running and who was winning. I wasn't. Couldn't care less because I don't even know who those films are, who they star, and I don't really care. But I did want to see what kind of political stuff they'd get into, and boy, had a doozy from the start. Julianne Hough. I believe she was from Dancing with the Stars, if memory serves me correct. She gave a 15-second soliloquy. I think soliloquy is supposed to be long, but anyway, it was recognizing three tribes of Indians, of Native Americans, I had to say. Three tribes of Native Americans, by the way, and she was wrong in that. And she's saying, well, we have to acknowledge them, and we're occupying their land. And she said it was the Tongava, the Tariff, and one other. But anyway, here's the problem. She's saying, well, we're honoring the land that we took. Wait, we didn't take the land. The Mexicans took the land. Didn't the Mexicans have the property before the Mexican-American War that happened, 1895? That was the Mexicans who took it from the Indians. So do we give it back to the Mexicans? Well, they're actually taking it back right now in a thing called Aztlan. They're taking back the land they said belongs to them, not the Indians. They don't care. So who are we going to give the land back to? The Mexicans, or are we going to give it back to the Indians? Or how about the aliens who may have been on the planet before anybody else was? We give it back to them? This is stupid. But I got more for you. The L.A. City Council, or County Council, I apologize. L.A. County Council had a document prepared back in 2022 involving the honoring the Native Americans that housed or lived on the L.A. land. And it said the County of Los Angeles recognizes that we occupy and the occupied land originally and still inhabited and cared for by the Tongva, the Tiataviam, the Serrano, the Kitch, and the Chumash peoples. Apparently a bunch of Indian tribes were running around loose in Southern California. Says we honor and pay respect to those elders and their descendants, past, present, and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of the lands and waters. I did not know that Indian tribes were running the land and running the waters. What, do you go to an Indian real estate company to get your land? Well, you send your water bill to the Indian water company? I don't know. But I think it's kind of ridiculous. So here's that Julianne Hough starts off the 97th Oscars. Oh, we're honoring the Native American tribe. Look, the Native American tribes were taken over by the Spanish, the Mexicans. So they want we get their land back to them first, and then let the Indians have it second? Political BS. That's my opinion. And I'm sure some of you are going to go, oh, how dare he say that? Look, every land somebody else was running. I don't care who you are. Other countries came in and took over lands. They're still doing it today. As the wars going on, people trying to take everybody over. So for her to get out there and pontificate about, oh, the tribes, we're in L.A., I don't care. We are who we are. We are where we are. We don't know who originally had this planet in the first place. You know, they talk about all those flying saucers and space things out there that nobody knows anything about, nobody's talking about. Do they own the planet first? They put us here? Are they watching us, seeing what's going on? I don't know. But I do know this. I spent how many hours last night? About 4 hours watching the Academy Awards to see what political nonsense they would do. And they started off with the first part of the awards, Julianne Hough. Oh, the Indians were on the land. Give me a break. This is why I don't watch the Emmys and the Grammys and the Golden Globes. Well, unless I absolutely have to. And last night, I had to, but I shouldn't have. Just my opinion, and I'm sticking with that. Well, what do you say we have a little chat about what happened at the White House and the Oval Office when the president of Ukraine, Mr. Zelensky, met with Donald Trump and the vice president? Well, things didn't go too well, did they? Well, a little something you need to know. Prior to the meeting at the White House, Mr. Zelensky met with a group of Democrats. And I don't know how long that meeting took, but I do know in the meeting, Zelensky was told by the Democrats, do not, I repeat, do not accept the deal from Donald Trump. I don't know why they said that. I don't know why they want to see a war go on. Well, unless somebody's pushing their buttons saying, hey, we want the war to go on because we keep selling them stuff. Now, the two most powerful entities in Washington, D.C., one is pharmaceutical. The pharma is the big one, and number two is the military-industrial complex. Those two are the big money honeypots in Washington, D.C. And if you're beholden to either one of them or both of them, they can pretty well tell you what they want. And you're going to do it because that's where your money comes from. I'm not saying any of the senators were on the take from either of these conglomerates, but telling them not to take Trump's deal where he's going to get money back, get the special ore, the rare earth items that they have over in Ukraine, that we could mine that stuff and get the money, the $350 billion we put into that country back? Well, I don't know. But here's something else you didn't know. Before the cameras went into the Oval Office to see everything was going on, the meeting had progressed for 43 minutes. Now, you heard me right. The meeting in the Oval Office had already progressed for 43 minutes until the cameras were let in to photograph. I'd be interested in what they were talking about that 43 minutes and why Zelensky decided to go ballistic when the cameras were there. What is going on? That, to me, is a bit of a puzzlement. Now, Trump said, look, we want to get the rare earth and the rare items out of the ground there and get ourselves paid back for the $350 billion we put into your country. And he seems to think that Zelensky thinks this war is going to go on and on and on with the U.S. backing it up. We can't do that forever, folks. Sorry. Doesn't work that way. But what Trump wants to do is this. He's saying, okay, we're going to start mining your area there for the rare earth stuff you have. Companies are going to put boots on the ground. You heard me right. Boots on the ground. Not our military boots, but the boots of those companies and their security people they have. That will be a tripwire. If we've got American companies, American individuals, American security forces, and a whole bunch of American miners doing all the mining over there in Ukraine, that's a tripwire. And if Russia decides to do anything going into that area, you're messing with American citizens. And that is never a good plan. So, yes, we're not doing a Korea where we're putting 26,000 troops on the ground, but American companies, American people, American security, their boots on the ground, and they can go, Russia, don't step over the line. I'm just telling you what happened and what are the options out there. Not sure how this is going to work out, but it's something for you to see and read exactly what's going on so you know what's happening and who's doing what to whom. Just something to think about. Probably the biggest story in sports, or the biggest controversy in sports, is one simple story. Should Pete Rose be allowed to be in the Hall of Fame? Now, you bring that up, and you're going to get arguments on both sides. And the shoeless Joe Jackson thing is going to be brought up, and the fact that he was declared ineligible for a lifetime. All of those things have been brought up, all right? So let's understand that. But let me tell you a little something about this. It seems that back on December 17th of last year, I wasn't aware of this, that a guy by the name of Jeff Alenkoff, he was the L.A. lawyer that represented the Pete Rose family, and Pete's daughter, her name is Fawn Rose, met with the commissioner. That's Rob Manfred, met with the commissioner in his office for an hour. And according to the meeting, and people who were there said it was gracious, it was productive, it was a pretty good meeting. Now, apparently, Mr. Lenkoff said, hey, look, a lifetime ban is a lifetime ban. But when you're dead, it's no longer a lifetime ban because your life is over. Well, Pete died back in I think it was September, at the age of 83, passed away. So technically, you could say, well, that lifetime ban while you're alive, well, when you're dead, it's over. The problem is this. You see, back in 1991, the Hall of Fame put in a new rule. And the rule says as long as you're on the ineligible list, you can't be up for the Hall of Fame. So they call it the Pete Rose rule, by the way. And so here's one of the things going on. As you know, or maybe you don't know, Pete served time in the Great Bar Hotel, i.e. prison, for tax evasion. And I think he served about 3 months, got out. And now President Trump is saying, hey, I'm going to pardon Pete Rose because he belongs in the Hall of Fame. Now, you're saying, oh, pardoning a baseball player? Be careful, folks. Joe Biden pardoned his son Hunter for, years? I mean, we don't even know what he did in all the years he's been pardoned for. So let's not go down that alley, okay? So let's just forget about that. If he wants to do it, that's his call. But will Rob Manfred take away the lifetime ban? That's the cookie. That's the big one in there. Pete Rose, I have seen him myself play. And turns out, and the reason I did, I'm not a Cincinnati Reds fan per se, okay? I'm a Cubs fan. I'm a diehard Cubs fan. Got the card and everything. But I have a friend back in the 1980s. His name was Dale E. Ludwig. Dale owned a company called Advanced Products over on North Wells, and we got to know each other, got to become very friendly. I mean, really, really close. But he was a diehard Cincinnati fan. And his wife, Liz, would tell me at opening day when the Reds were playing, she said, you got to drive Dale down to Cincinnati. I'm going, what? No, he's going to fall asleep in the car. You have to drive him down. I would drive Dale down to Cincinnati to see the Reds opening day. That's the way it worked. But here's something interesting about my friend's Dale. He had a swimming pool behind his house, and he had 2 little cabins built, one on either side of the swimming pool. But on the bottom of the swimming pool was a great big giant Cincinnati Reds logo. The bottom of the swimming pool. Now, one side of the swimming pool, one of these little cabin things on the side of the swimming pool, was designed to people change clothes or whatever. But the other side was off limits to anybody because it was filled full of Cincinnati Reds memorabilia. And every year for Christmas, I would give Dale stuff I'd find for the Cincinnati Reds. Because, he was a Cincinnati Reds fan. What are you going to do? But we're going back to Pete Rose. This is how I kind of know what's going on. So, what do I think? Should Pete Rose have that lifetime ban canceled? Well, technically, yeah. He's dead. If he's banned in a lifetime, he's dead. Now, if the commissioner wants to say, okay, we're excusing this, he got a pardon from the president, it's up to the baseball writers. The commissioner does not control people going into the Hall of Fame. Just understand that. That's the Baseball Writers Association. If the writers decide eventually if they want Pete in the Hall of Fame, I mean, the guy's got, 24 years of baseball? He's got 4,256 hits. I mean, name the records he doesn't own. So if they want to admit him what the writers do, that's their call, not the commissioners. Should the commissioners say, yeah, all things are off? If the writers want him in, the writers want him in. That, in my opinion, would be the fair way to do it. Not sure what to do about shoeless Joe Jackson. I'm just telling you my opinion. And just one person. And I think that maybe let the writers decide if Pete should be in the Hall of Fame. And that's all I got to say about that. No doubt you've heard about Donald Trump saying he's going to start charging tariffs to countries like Canada and Mexico and China and who knows where else. But did you ever wonder if other countries are already charging us tariffs? Well, I want you to take a look at this because this is a document that shows what kind of tariffs the U.S. is having to pay the country of Canada. And these tariffs have been going on for years. And take a look at this. In milk, the tariff is 270%. And believe me, the people in Wisconsin, the dairy farmers up there, are not happy about this at all, but what can they do? You want to import milk into Canada? The tariff is 270%. And for cheese, 245%. Once again, folks making cheese up in Wisconsin, paying heavily for this. Butter, 298%. Chicken, 238%. Sausages, 69%. Barley seed, 57%. Bovine, that's meat, is a 26.5% tariff. Cars, 25%. HVAC, 45%. Vacuums, 35%. Cable boxes, 35%. TVs, I don't even know we're making them in the United States, 45%. Steel tariff is 25%. Aluminum is 45%. And copper, 48%. Those are tariffs that Canada is charging us in the United States. So to say that, well, it's shameful that we're putting tariffs on Canadian goods coming in, we're already paying these tariffs, or the people in Canada are paying these tariffs just to get United States products exported into their country. So is it fair to the Canadians? Or is it fair to the Americans? Or are we just getting even for what they're doing to us? I'm just saying tariffs exist. Now, are these tariffs permanent? I don't believe so. I think we're seeing other countries are saying, look, I don't want to get in a trade war here. Don't want to get this thing ramped up so bad that it starts creating a lot of big problems. No, a lot of these countries are saying, oh, look, we're going to change our ways because you're making it more expensive for us to do business. Now you're saying, well, doesn't matter. The importers are going to pay the tariffs. That goes to the federal government. They get more money. And the consumer, that's you and me, we end up paying more for products. Well, to a degree, it is a possibility if you buy those products. Now, not everything is made in the United States, and I agree with that. But is this tariff transitory? This is something that could go away if people, well, get in line, for lack of a better term. Can't tell you that. But just understand, Canada has been charging us tariffs for years on regular things like milk and cheese and cars. So, understand, it's been going on for a long time. And if you wonder why we don't see American cars in places like Europe, it's because the tariffs that they charge are so massive, American cars can't be sold in those countries. The tariffs are a game that is played by everybody, not just America. Something for you to keep in mind when you happen to think about tariffs. What's it going to do to us? Well, what's it already doing to other countries for products that we make? Something to think about. It's the way the game is played in the world. Let's see who blinks first. Did you ever wonder why that you have to see so many different languages printed on about everything that you happen to go to? Maybe you read a pamphlet from the U.S. government in multiple languages. You read all sorts of things in stores that are in multiple languages. Did you wonder why we have that? Well, it turns out that back in 2000, then Bill Clinton, President of the United States, declared in an executive order that in order to improve access services to persons with limited English proficiency, all documents and such items produced or funded by the federal government or under government funding must be in multiple languages. Well, now you see everything in multiple languages. And frankly, the country is kind of getting bogged down with a lot of languages, many of which no one speaks or very few speak. Well, clear back in 1907, President Ted Roosevelt issued a document, and he told the people, hey, we got a problem in America because you have to understand the one thing that holds this country together is language. And he wrote the following. Take a look at this. And I'm quoting him here. In the first place, we should insist that if an immigrant who comes here in good faith becomes an American and assimilates himself to us, he shall be treated on an equal equity like anyone else. For it is an outrage to discriminate against any such man because of creed, birthplace, or origin. But this is predicated upon the person's becoming in every facet an American, and nothing but an American. There can be no divided allegiance here. Any man who says he's an American, but something else also, isn't an American at all. We have room for but one flag, the American flag. We have room for but one language here, and that is the English language. And we have room for but one sole loyalty, and that loyalty is to the American people. So, now you have Donald Trump coming out with a new executive order that says, hey, the official language of the United States is English. There's 195 countries in this world, and 180 of them have their own official language, and that's the language they utilize. It's time for the United States to start understanding if you want to keep this country together, we must maintain one common language. You see, in America, we're pretty much like a tossed salad. We got people from every country, every place, every origin. But the salad dressing that holds that mixed salad together is English. And if we lose that, we will lose the country as we know it. It will no longer be the country that, well, it's America, because then we're going to be Spanish America, Israeli America, African America. We're going to be all kinds of different America, and yet that's not the way the way we were intended to be. I believe Teddy Roosevelt was right. He said we have one language, and I think we ought to remember that when we go forth. And now a new executive order, replacing the one from 2000, says now America has an official language, and it's English. And I recommend we follow it. Many years ago, there used to be a radio commentator by the name of Paul Harvey. And he used to do Paul Harvey reports that lasted around 15 minutes every day, Monday through Friday. And he also had a thing called The Rest of the Story. That was a little 5-minute piece that he would talk about something, well, you probably didn't know about. Well, I want to give you a 5-minute Paul Harvey story that maybe you didn't know about. This has to do with high-speed rail. Now, much of the talk has been done about high-speed rail. If you go over to Asia and Japan, they have high-speed rail, pretty fast cars. But it's been tried here in the United States a little bit, but they've tried to build things and build more railroads, but well, nothing else has really worked out, folks. But there was something that happened clear back in 1966. Now, I realize that was a long time ago, but in 1966, an experiment was tried by folks from the New York Central Railroad Company. Now, what they did was they got a railroad car, not an engine, a railroad car, and mounted a cowling on the front, the fairing, if you would, sort of like you put a car on a NASCAR vehicle to make it look like something it's not, but it had a cowling on the front to make it look more aerodynamic. And what they did was they took off 2 jet engines from a B-36. Now, if you remember back in the old days when the Cold War started after World War II, biggest bomber we had flying was a B-36. It had 6 props on it and 4 jets. I mean, you had 6 turning and 4 burning is what you had. Well, they managed to get 2 of those jets and decided they would mount it on the top of this rail car. And that's what they did. Well, here's the way they had to figure it out. They were looking for a line that was really straight. And they found one. Turns out there was a line between Toledo, Ohio, and Butler, Indiana. That's right. Between Toledo and Butler was a straight track. It was a 2-track system, and it was the longest straight track in the world. It still is, by the way. So they said, okay, let's put that train car, and let's take that engine. You can see it's mounted on this 2 engines mounted on the top of this rail car, and let's see how fast we can get it to go. And that's exactly what they did. So back on July 23rd in 1966, they took this car with the jet engines mounted on the top, lit it up, and let it go. And it turns out on that 76-mile stretch, they were able to reach a speed of 183.68 miles an hour and a passenger car with jet engines on the top. Now, what happened to that? Well, it turns out they have taken that car with the jet engines on the top, and it's now located in the Byron, Ohio train yard, their depot. So if you want to go see it, apparently it's still there. Bryan, Ohio's in Williams County. It's not too far from Fort Wayne and Allen County. It's over there in northwest Ohio. So if you want to go see a train car with a jet engine mounted on top that went 183.68 miles an hour, fastest car that's the fastest real thing we've ever done in the United States, there it is. Your chance to see it. So there it was from Toledo to Butler, Indiana. 76 miles of straight track. They put a car on it, put a jet engine on it, and let her ride. And there it is. So the car is now in Bryan, Ohio, if you want to go see it. Just a little something for you to know that maybe you didn't know about something in northeastern Indiana, northwestern Ohio, that now we call the rest of the story. Well, if you watched Donald Trump when he got elected, he said one of the things he was going to do in his campaign promises is to get rid of the Department of Education. Now you're saying, oh, really? Okay. How's he going to do that? Well, here's something you need to know. The Department of Education used to be, back in a long time ago, in the 70s, Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. It was called HEW back in those days. But when Jimmy Carter was president, and this goes back in the late 1970s, he was running for re-election against Ronald Reagan back in 1979. And he was in trouble. Reagan was hot. Reagan was moving up, and Carter had a lot of problems in administration, including the takeover of the Iran embassy and the hostages held there. So he was desperate. He and his staff were desperate to do anything to try to win the election. One of the groups he said, hey, I need is the teachers union. The teachers in America. He needed those. So his union got together and talked to the teachers union and said, hey, tell you what we're going to do. What if we take the HEW, the Health, Education, and Welfare, take that education out and make it one separate cabinet position, a brand new cabinet position, Secretary of Education. And the union said, well, that's great. That'll work for us. That way, he said, well, unions, you guys, you can help run the rodeo. And you can determine what all the schools in America do under your, backdoor guidance. And I'm saying backdoor, okay? So, back in 1979, Jimmy Carter wrote an executive order saying, I'm breaking up HEW, I'm making a new cabinet, the Department of Education. So now you end up with two cabinet secretaries, HEW, the old HEW, which is now Health and Human Services, and the Department of Education. Their budget back then was $254 billion. That sounds like a lot of money, and frankly it is. But their budget today is only $268 billion. That's $14 billion since 1979. If you do the math, it works out about 3% per year. Now, they've got 4,000 people in that building. That's the smallest division, the smallest secretarial division of any of them that exist. The smallest, but in many ways the most powerful, because they control what the schools do. And frankly, our schools in America have not done very well. You take a look at the ratings, the schools in America are lousy compared to other countries because they're controlled by one organization, the Department of Education. They tell the schools what to do, how to do, or else you don't get money. They run the schools ramrod. Hasn't worked. It's failed. Nobody wants to admit it, except the new Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon. She's, you might remember Vince McMahon from the wrestling. All right, she says, my job is to get rid of this. Now, the Congress passed a bill back in those days that allowed that to happen by creating this bill that was done. And it was the Department of Education bill that was done back in 1979, signed on October 17th of 1979 by Jimmy Carter. So Congress enacted a law to create this department. But Jimmy Carter created it with an executive order. And supposedly, if you have another executive order saying I'm rescinding it, well, that's going to create a battle. I can believe it will be a battle because the Democrats do not want the DOE to go away, because that's the teachers union. That's who they have. They ain't going to lose that, folks. So, could it be a battle that ends up in the U.S. Supreme Court saying, hey, I'm the president. It was started by executive order. If I want to get rid of it, I can write another executive order and say it's gone. But the Congress says, well, we passed a bill. And is that bill law? Because Jimmy Carter signed it. President Jimmy Carter signed it. Not sure how that's going to work out. That could be the biggest battle we're going to see that could end up in the Supreme Court. But right now, Linda McMahon says, get rid of the DOE. And frankly, with 4,000 employees, that is a pimple in Washington, D.C., but it's a very big and festering pimple that controls a whole lot of stuff, namely your schools. Should the schools and the money go back to the states? Most people would say yes. And based on the results of students nationwide and worldwide, the answer is definitely it belongs someplace else other than the halls of Washington, D.C. Just saying what I think a lot of people actually believe. But if I were running baseball, there might be some changes I would make in the rules, and I want to tell you exactly what I think those changes might be. And it's only one big change, but it might affect the people who play the game. For years and years and years, people were fighting over baseball about one particular thing, and that is a designated hitter. And that has been a point of contention for people who hate the designated hitter and love it. Now, here's what I think. What if they had a new rule that said if your starting pitcher leaves, that designated hitter goes away for the remainder of the game? Now, I'm talking about starting pitchers, the likes of which are famous pitchers like Nolan Ryan and Greg Maddux and Randy Johnson, Sandy Koufax, Tom Seaver, Cy Young, Roger Clemens, Warren Spahn, Jim Palmer, Catfish Hunter, and, of course, Fergie Jenkins. Now, those are all great pitchers, right? But the way the rules are today, if you've got a fantastic pitcher in there, there's a designated hitter. He doesn't pitch. Affects the game. So what do you say we change the rule? The rule says if you're a fantastic pitcher, he leaves the game, and you bring in somebody out of the bullpen, that designated hitter for your big fantastic pitcher goes away. And that person that you bring into the game to fill in for your fancy pitcher, he's got a bat. That changes the entire flow of the game right there. And suddenly, the DH is gone and that pitcher has to hit. So does that mean you're going to have to keep your big-time pitcher in longer to keep your designated hitter going? Could dramatically affect the game. Now, this is probably pie-in-the-sky stuff, and it'll probably never be adopted. But think about it. If the starting pitcher, who's your big, fantastic, big-time player, while he's in there, you can have a DH. But the moment he leaves, that person who comes in to pitch, that person has to bat. That means like a double switch could happen, right? Could make the game very, very interesting. So I'm just saying, just a little thing here in the beginning saying, boy, if I was running baseball, if I was a commish, changing the rule. Your starting pitcher, yeah, you could have your DH, but the moment he leaves, whoever you bring in from the bench, that person has to bat. That, my friends, would change the game, and starting pitchers would then become very valuable, or maybe not. Just depends on what you're willing to risk. Just my thought about baseball. I realize baseball hasn't even started yet, but what about changing that rule? Do you think that would change baseball? My guess is it just might. That's my 2 cents worth, and I'm going to leave it at that. One of the things talked about in the president's State of the Union, and it was a State of the Union speech, had to do with USAID. If you don't know what USAID is, they do some good things. They help folks out when situations are bad, or bad storms happen, or a crisis happen, or what have you. The U.S. sends money over to feed people in the form of rice and what have you. They do some good things. But what you don't realize is when you heard the president talk about money went for this and money went for that, and you're sitting there shaking your head going, what the heck is that for? Why do we have to have that? Folks, you got to understand something. USAID is the money pot for the CIA. Not for everything the USAID does, please understand that. but that is where they fund things. The USAID is the honeypot for black ops. That's where the CIA says, well, we're putting money into this country. They're buying somebody off. That's what basically the CIA does, to get things changed the way they want it. And that's when you see all those weird things. Why did they spend $20 million for Sesame Street? And somebody was being paid off. This is where the CIA gets their funding account. This is the ATM for the CIA. You got to understand something. When Musk and his people wanted to go over to the USAID and look into their computer to see what was going on, remember the head of security said, no, we're not going to allow you into there. You can't see anything. And that got people saying, wait a minute, what is he protecting? I'll tell you what he's protecting. He's protecting what the CIA's got in their black ops going in there, because that's in his computer system. What that money was spent for, where it went, and what it was done, that's really there. Now, the woman who ran USAID, she had been in the office for about 3 years. When she got started in that office, she said her net worth was about $8 million. 3 years later, her net worth had skyrocketed to $30 million. Now, if you're earning, say, $200,000 a year salary, and 3 years, that's $600,000, how do you go from $8 million to $30 million? Someone explain that one to me. Don't know. Well, let me tell you who she's married to. Her husband is an advisor to Barack Obama. Matter of fact, her husband wrote a book, How to Convince People Without Them Knowing You're Convincing Them, called Nudge. So there she is, the wife of the person who's a major advisor to Barack Obama. She's running USAID. This is where the black money goes. Nobody knows what's going on because it's so black and dark, but there's where the money pot is, where the ATM is USAID. So some of that weird money is saying, why did they get $6 million for condoms in Zamboya or wherever the hell it was? It's not. The CIA's paying people off to get things done. The black ops in the CIA, nobody knows what's going on, and apparently the folks over there at the CIA don't even want the president to know what's going on, by virtue of the fact they are saying, hey, you can't look at what we're doing. This, folks, is scary. When you've got an underground organization, a black, for lack of a better term, organization, that doesn't even want the president to know what you're doing, we got a problem. That's not the way this country is supposed to run, but that's exactly what's going on. So now you understand what's happening. USAID, yes, they do some good things, but basically it's the ATM machine for CIA undercover black ops. Now you understand? Now it makes you wonder. Now you know why they don't want anybody to see what's in their computer. Just laying it out for you. The CIA does some really, well, maybe bad things. And the USAID is where they use the money to do it. Just telling you. Now you know.